Title of the exhortation is Salvation Through Marriage.
Well, good morning, everyone. Yeah, as I was talking to Brother Mark this morning, he said, well, you're kind of letting the cat out of the bag with the title and reading. And I said, yeah, I like to do that. So that's where we're trying to get to salvation through marriage. We're trying to get to the marriage supper of the Lamb. So I just didn't want you to think salvation was possible through our marriages. Just get that out of the way right from the start. If that was the case, we'd all be in trouble. But I've been to a lot of weddings in my life. I can't think how many, but a lot. That I was at least two that were on a beach. So when I went to a Catholic wedding once that was all in Latin, that was long and tedious because they did give you a little pamphlet that explained in English what they were saying, but it was rough, I thought. I've been to long, hot weddings. I've been to very cold weddings. I've been to great receptions afterwards, celebrations that were wonderful. I've been to some that got out of hand. But weddings are interesting, and you always hope the best for the married couple. You hope things go well. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. So what's this all about? And I was thinking of Adam and Eve getting married. I don't think there was a best man or maid of honor. Not a lot of people to witness it. In fact, no people. Maybe angels, I don't know. What kind of celebration? I think Adam was really happy because it seems that there was some period of time that he was able to realize that he was alone. And when God presented him with Eve, I think he was very happy. And he probably celebrated. I'm sure they both did. I think he says something that is kind of a vow, or at least a confession of how he loves his new wife. Excuse me, because he says, this at last is bone of my bones, flesh of my flesh. And he called her woman because she was taken out of man. So I think that's something of a vow or a confession of how he was happy about this marriage. And it also says, and I think this is what we're going to focus on today because this is the means of salvation. He says, or we don't know who said this. I think it's God, but it says the two became one. The two will become one, which is kind of interesting because she was taken out of him. So it was obvious to him that they were one flesh, that they were actually, she was made from him, and that he was ecstatic over this. They are one flesh. And I think that's again, is our means of salvation. Let's just look at that so we remember, and it's in our mind. Genesis 2. So it says, then the man said, this at last is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh, and she shall be called woman because she was taken out of men. And this part I think is important too. Therefore, a man leaves his father and his mother and cleaves to his wife, and they become one flesh. And the man and his wife were both naked and were not ashamed. So Eve was literally made from Adam. And I think that God is saying here, all subsequent marriages should be viewed in the same way, that the two become one. Even though a female is not made from a male in every case, he still wants you to view it that way, that the two are one flesh. And mind you, he doesn't say one spirit, which is sometimes how we look at it. Yeah, these two get so close that they're just like one. They think the same and everything. No, he's saying one flesh, that like physically you're one, not one spirit. I think that comes later. Now there's a problem, right? We know that all this happens. We don't know how long they're together, but then a problem arises. And the problem is what? Eve sins, right? She takes of the tree. Now, now there's a difference, right? If they are indeed one flesh, how does God look at them now? Because for at least however long, we don't know, you have the man who has not taken of the tree, and you have the woman who has. So this one flesh now has a problem. How is God going to view it? Well, God never gets the chance to explain how he views it, because Eve offers the fruit to Adam, and that doesn't really, Adam takes it and doesn't really give God a chance to say how he views this situation. So Adam decides in a moment, in a period of time, however long it takes him, he decides he's going to become like her. And maybe that was in his mind. We are one flesh. How can we be one flesh if we're different? Either God is going to take her away, or something bad's going to happen. I think, well, you can decide for yourself, because the Bible doesn't really say why he took the fruit. But maybe it was his concern for being alone again. Now he's got a wife that is in a different condition than him. So he decides to share that. Now both of them are naked before God, and they realize it. Their flesh has been corrupted. So Adam didn't consider what could have happened, what God could have done. He didn't go to God and say, how can we fix this? Instead, he saw his wife standing before him, his wife who he thought was a wonderful gift from God. And he said, okay, I'll be with you. So Adam didn't consider that God could have restored Eve's flesh. And instead of saying, I think it's better that we're both corrupt. He could have instead maybe brought her up back to his level because he had not sinned at that point. But that didn't happen. So they're both on their road to death. But God did give them hope through their seed. And of course, that's what this talk is all about, salvation through marriage. Because it's still the fact that the two can become one, that there's still this opportunity to be one flesh. But you need someone, of course, like Jesus, who doesn't eat of the fruit, right? He doesn't sin. He never does in his life. And let's take a look at John 2. Because Jesus certainly was tempted throughout his life to eat this fruit. Sometimes people didn't even know that they were tempting him. And sometimes they did know, and they were trying to get him to do something wrong. So in John 2, and I think this is where, because Jesus had even more things, I would say, that would be obstacles. Adam didn't know what it was like to be a sinful creature. Jesus did know, even though he didn't sin, he knew what it was like to be born in sinful flesh. Anyway, in verse 23, it says, "Now when he was in Jerusalem at the Passover feast, many believed in his name when they saw the signs which he did. But Jesus did not trust himself to them, because he knew all men and needed no one to bear witness of man, for he himself knew what was in man." So he's no surprises to Jesus. He knows what men are like, and he's still trying to save them. He's still trying to resist. During his life, he's trying to resist his bride offering him the fruit, which he knows would ruin everything. So Jesus goes into the wilderness to see how he would be tempted most. And he finds out kind of what his flesh leans towards. He still resists, but he kind of finds out that there are certain areas that he would really be tempted to give in to taking the fruit. And just as an aside, do we know those things about ourselves? Do we ever go into the wilderness and kind of think about what tempts us most and how we could resist it? Might be a good idea if you haven't done it already. So all through his life, then, we can see him resisting. He says, well, let's look at one example in Matthew 16. And verse 21 says, "From that time, Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things from the elders and chief priests and scribes, and be killed, and on the third day be raised. And Peter took him and began to rebuke him, saying, God forbid, Lord, this shall never happen to you. But he turned and said to Peter, Get behind me, Satan. You are a hindrance to me, for you are not on the side of God, but of men. So at this point, here it's just like Eve holding the fruit out and saying, Eat. And Jesus said, I will not. And he says plainly to Peter, you are on the side of men. This is wrong. I have to resist this. Get behind me, Satan. It's almost like he was talking to the serpent and saying, you evil creature, don't say these things. And I don't think Peter had any intention of trying to get Jesus to sin. He was just struck by what Jesus was saying, and he didn't want it to happen to him. And I think Eve loved Adam as well, and why she offered him the fruit is because she was in trouble and thought maybe he could help. But Jesus says no. And there are many instances, I think even little ones, like Martha coming to him and saying, get Mary to come and help me. She's out here doing nothing, just enjoying the words that you're saying. And he says, no, she's chosen the right portion. So that's just a little example. I mean, people always trying to get him to do something that he knew he shouldn't. And we see the Pharisees trying to tempt him and they bring an adulterous woman and trying to make him make a decision about this woman. And all he is trying to do is save the world. Bring salvation to the world. He's not trying to judge anyone. He wants, at least at this point, he wants people to be saved and, make a commitment to him. So all through his life, he resists. He doesn't take the fruit. And as Mark said last week, this is an amazing man. That he could do that he could, every time he was certainly God's son. So he gets to the end. He did all of that. He resisted enough, and now it's time for him to do what he can to heal this one flesh, to make it right again. And we see in John 17 that he goes through all that. And, I think we've read all this and know what he's doing. But it's just good to emphasize in comparison with Adam and Eve, Jesus says, I have kept all those that you gave me. Adam says, you gave me this woman, and because of her, I think he's blaming her to some degree, but I think Adam was saying, like, what else was I supposed to do? You gave me this beautiful gift, and she had a problem, and what else could I do? And Jesus is saying in John 17, you gave me these men, and I kept them. I kept them safe, ready for this time. So in this chapter, he talks about keeping them safe, that he's going to glorify his Father. And that in all these chapters, he's talking about becoming one again, that he wants them to become one as he and his Father are one. But they're going to be one flesh, and he's going to make it whole. How is he going to do this? Well, he tells them, I'm not going to eat your fruit. You are going to eat what I give you. That's what's going to make you whole. And during this, and even prior to this, he says, eat the bread and the wine. This will make our body one whole, perfect flesh. When he first offered that, when he first said, unless you eat my flesh and drink my blood, you have no life in you, people were turned off by that. A lot of people left him when he said that. But this is how we get salvation. He doesn't take the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. He gives us the fruit that will make us well. That's why he says, get behind me and follow me. Don't get in front and try to block my path. Get behind and take the fruit I am offering. This will bring you life. This truly is the tree of life for those who would follow Jesus. So he offers himself as a method of healing this imbalance in the two parts of the flesh. The two can become one, but this one, the one that's way down here, needs to be healed, is brought up by Jesus' flesh that he offers to his bride. So that's the story. And I think we all know that story. And we all understand how Jesus is fixing us through marriage. And it's a great thing, I guess, that we should be treated so well. But the thing is, do we understand that? And sometimes we don't, I guess. Sometimes we can see Jesus' love for us, but maybe we have a hard time expressing our love to him. In Matthew 7, Jesus says, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, shall enter the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. On that day, many will say to me, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, and cast out demons in your name, and do many mighty works in your name? Then I will declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you evildoers. So I'm sure you're all familiar with this. The first thing Adam and Eve knew when they ate of the tree of knowledge of good and evil was that they were naked. And I think from then on, whenever it says someone knew his wife and they had children, that's what they're referring to, this little bit of knowledge that they had right at the beginning. They knew that they were naked, so they used that as an expression of, they knew, they saw, it's not a simple thing, I think, that they knew their nakedness, usually meaning they were exposed so that they could have sex, I guess. And that was the expression a lot of times for when someone was going to be in some kind of intimate relationship. But Jesus says that here as well. I never knew you. And I don't think he's talking about that. I don't think he's talking about knowing their nakedness, because he knew all men were that way. And I think he's talking about something much deeper, something that we need to happen in our relationship with Jesus, that he knows us intimately, but not in a sexual way. He knows us in our spirit, in our hearts, in our desires. This passage says, some people, you thought that you were doing the right things, but I never knew you. Never really got to know you. I never got to love you like a husband loves his wife. And whose fault is that? It's our fault. It's whoever doesn't really get to know him. Because again, like Mark was saying last week, this is an incredible man. We have no excuse for not knowing him, for not showing ourselves to him and saying, help me. I know you love me. Show me how to love you. So we do want to know our master in the most intimate ways. And if we don't know him, it's time to learn how to love him and understand him. So getting back to wedding celebrations, we think Adam and Eve had a pretty simple one, just the two of them. This final one, as was in the reading that Livre read, it's going to be an all-out wonderful celebration. And if we can picture it, if we can just see it and understand, and he tries to do it every week that we're here. He says, remember me. This is my body. This I gave for you to fix the problem of one flesh. And so that is what we need to do. Not just every week, but every day, remember what is going. Long for our master to return, long for the bridegroom to come and reveal himself to the world and have this great celebration. You know, there's one thing that happens in a celebration always that is pretty neat, and it was in the reading as well. And that's the bride comes out in a beautiful garment, usually. And it's usually white, and that's appropriate with what the Bible says. The reading in Revelation, that Livre read, mentions the white linen that was given to the bride, but it's also mentioned earlier on in the letters to the ecclesias. In Revelation 3, verse 5, it says, he who conquers shall be clad thus in white garments, and I will not blot his white garment, and I will not blot his name out of the book of life. I will confess his name before my Father and before his angels. And again, a little further down, let's see, He who conquers, I will make him, this is verse 12, he who conquers, I will make him a pillar in the temple of my God, never shall he go out of it. But I will write my name, I will write on him the name of my God and the name of the city of my God, the new Jerusalem, which comes down from heaven, out of heaven, and my own new name. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. Okay. So anyway, here we'll have those for the celebration, and we know of the wedding feast, the banquet that's prepared, the garments that are given us. So he's prepared for us white garments. It's as if the sin never happened in our lives. He made our flesh whole again. This is an amazing man, and we need to learn to love him as best we can. And then at that time, he will give us these beautiful garments and say, yes, you are my bride. You are one of the many that I have come to know and understand, and I want you to be part of this wedding celebration. Let's look forward to that day and remember it when we remember our Savior and what he gave us.